I freaking hate my phone. Got about halfway through this preview, and then my phone cut out on me because my stupid phone, when I ask it to delete videos, it saves it just in case if I want to recover it, and my phone was out of memory. So I gotta start this thing all freaking over. So upset right now. Okay, before I get to the actual preview, I just want to kind of recap the entire year in terms of participation and stuff like that, and I'm going to start with the two rookies. I'm really disappointed in the two rookies. Bork and Ivan. Well, Mike and Rob. You guys vouched for these guys. Now I know Bork. I don't really know Ivan. But they've brought literally nothing to the table this year whatsoever, other than doing some crappy trades. That's all that they've brought to the table. So, congratulations. But it's not just Ivan and Bork that have struggled to participate this year. There's been quite a few guys. And really, outside of Rob doing the one preview, Chris has stepped up his commenting game recently. Mike's done a couple previews. Durs has done a couple previews or recaps. Am I forgetting anyone else? Really hasn't been any participation. I was really hoping that, once we got on Facebook, Brian has brought up a couple good ideas as well. I knew I was forgetting someone. But I was really hoping once we got on Facebook that, the discussion would be good. And it just hasn't. Now, maybe you guys just want this to be strictly a fantasy league. We're gonna play our players, and we're gonna sit back, and we're going to observe, and we're not gonna do anything else. Maybe that's what this league is destined to be. I've been trying like heck to get some added flavor into it, doing what I can to make it more interesting. And maybe I'm the only one that even cares about it. I guess I can say right now that next year I probably am not putting in as much effort as I put in this year, especially if it's not going to be reciprocated whatsoever. So I leave that in your guys' hands. What can you bring to the table to help make this league more exciting? Because I'll admit, Mike, you'll be happy to hear this, D2 is more exciting than D1. There's many voices that talk over there, although there are still a good handful that rarely say anything. But D2 is more exciting than D1. I was really hoping that would change this year. It has not. And again, maybe you guys just don't care. I'm only going to really preview the championship game. I'll briefly preview the other two games. We'll start with the third place game because that's probably the least important of the three games. Myself versus Brian. I'm actually going to take Brian. My team has been struggling. I don't particularly love any of my matchups. Yahoo does have me favored, and I really shouldn't be so negative on my team, but they're coming off a 115-point performance. I underperformed by 65 points according to projections. There's been times that dudes have not even scored 65 points, and that's how much my team underperformed last week. Just playing terrible. It wasn't a whole lot better the week before. I don't know what's happened. Basically, Denver's passing attack is not what it was earlier in the year, and for sure not what it was last year. And I don't see that necessarily bouncing back, although we do have Monday Night Football Peyton Manning. Primetime Peyton always shows up to play, so maybe we see a little bit of a bounce-back performance. But I'm going to take Brian to beat me. In the license plate frame game, our two rookies actually managed to stay out of it, despite their ineptitude, despite their crappy trades. They're not playing for the license plate. We've got two veterans. Justin and Chris. I mentioned to Chris, the license plate actually has value. So you actually stand to gain some monetary value if you happen to lose this game. And I think it's your team that it doesn't look so good for. Not a very hot start for you on Thursday. I'm going to be honest, I didn't really look at this a whole lot. And I think I'm taking Justin. And I'm going strictly based on projections. I did not look into that at all. And then finally in our championship game, the one that matters the most, we've got two first-time, I think it's the first time either one of these teams has been in the championship game. Well, for sure for Mike, this is his first time in the playoffs. Mike has yet to lose a playoff game. He's the only one that can be able to say that. But because it's the championship game, I'm going above and beyond. I'm not just using the projections like I usually do, but we'll do a step-by-step breakdown of the matchups. And I'm not just looking at, wide receivers as a whole, but we'll look at each individual player. For kickers, Mike has Steven Hauschka at Arizona going up against Stephen Gostkowski at the New York Jets. Arizona has a really, really good defense. Even if their offense is going to suck, they have a really good defense. I see the final score of that game being 14-3, Seattle. I think that Seattle gets a couple touchdowns. Maybe they get into, field goal territory. I'm going to put the over-under for Hauschka at 5. Should probably still take the over. He's probably going to score more than 5, but I would not be shocked if he scored 5 or less against Arizona's defense. At Arizona, they have not lost yet there. Probably do it this week because they've got Ryan Lindley going, but yeah, I am going to take Stephen Gostkowski to outscore Steven Hauschka, Battle of the Stevens. For our second flex spot, Mike is rolling out Goose Egg Jordan Matthews, and I'm calling him Goose Egg Jordan Matthews because that's what he put up last week. He did put up a 0 spot last week against me. Still wasn't enough for me to win, but what can you do? And he is going up against Michael Rivera. Now, Rivera has been a pretty good tight end all year. He did not score 0 last week, at least I don't think so. Obviously, Matthews has much more upside, but I'm going to call this an overall wash because Matthews could put up 0 again. Sanchez has not been as good of a player as he's been in the past or earlier on in the year getting the ball to Matthews. So I'm going to call it a wash because I still don't think Rivera's all that good. Matthews more upside, but more likely to put up a dud. In our first flex spot, I'm actually going to put Mike Evans here for Mike because Tampa's going up at Green Bay. Oh, versus Green Bay. That's in Tampa. Well, even still, I think Green Bay is going to roll over Tampa. Tampa doesn't really have any interest in playing to win. They want to secure that number 1 overall pick, get Marcus Mariota. And Evans has been very touchdown dependent lately. He did have a good stretch there where he was, catching 10 balls and 150 yards and multiple touchdowns. Past few games, I've been paying a lot of attention to the Buccaneers. Past few games, the receptions and the yards haven't been there. He's scored touchdowns. 2 against Detroit, had 1 last week, but that's where all of his points have come from. Over on Rob's side, he does have Boom Herron going for the Indianapolis Colts against Dallas and at Dallas. Dallas doesn't have a really good defense. They could be without DeMarco Murray. The Colts like to beat up on bad teams. I'm not saying that Dallas is bad, but without Murray, they might be bad. And I could see Indianapolis really taking it to Dallas. All that being said, even though I said negatives for Evans and positives for Herron, I'm still going to take Evans to outscore Herron this week. For tight end, we got 2 oldies but goodies that have been rejuvenated this season, Greg Olsen and Antonio Gates. I'm going to give the slight edge to Greg Olsen. I think he's got a little bit easier matchup, although Cleveland has a decent defense. I still don't think it's as good as San Fran's. So I'm going to give the slight edge to Greg Olsen for tight ends. For running back 2, Marshawn Lynch. We've already talked about Seattle going up against Arizona. I like Arizona's defense. I still like Seattle to put up a couple touchdowns. It's going to come down to whether or not Lynch gets one of those touchdowns. Although we could factor in if Seattle is up big, they could be trying to run out the clock. So maybe Lynch does get quite a bit of yardage. And then over on Rob's side, the ultimate boom or bust, Trey Mason. And he really had 1 boom week, and that was that 36-point performance he put up in Week 13. I've been pretty quiet since then. Obviously, I got to give this to Lynch. For the RB1, again, I'm going to give this to Mike. He's rolling out Le'Veon Sparty Bell. Best running back in the league. Best contract, arguably, in the league. In the offseason, I've got a ton of cap room. If I offered you $250 for Le'Veon, do you take it? $275, $300. Is there any amount of money that you would take for Le'Veon Bell? Maybe it depends if you win this week. If you're going for back-to-back titles versus, your first title if you fall short this week. Then over on Rob's side, he's running out Justin Forsett. And can't read my own handwriting. What the heck does that say? I have no idea who Baltimore's going up against. Forsett has been a bounce-back story, been a feel-good story. Not going to happen this week, though. Bell is going to absolutely crush Forsett. If you can tell where I am, I had to take a detour because I was like 3 minutes away from home when I realized that my phone cut out. So, just driving around a little bit. For wide receiver 3, I gave the nod to Roddy over Mike Evans. Julio, I don't think is playing. Roddy had a big game last week without Julio. Atlanta's playing at New Orleans. New Orleans has not been good this year, even though it's at New Orleans. I see Roddy with another big game. Over on Rob's side, I put his wide receiver 3 as Golden Tate. Since Kelvin's been back, Tate's numbers have dropped off quite a bit, which should make sense. Stafford does like to force the ball to Kelvin. More on him soon. But I got to give this one to Mike as well. I'm going to give it to Roddy over Golden. Wide receiver 2. For Mike, got Alshon Jeffrey. First Detroit. I'm a little skeptical to put him here, only because Chicago's rolling out Jimmy Clausen this week. Is he going to be able to feed Alshon? I could see him forcing it to Alshon many, many times over. Interceptions don't hurt Alshon's points. And then over on Rob's side, it's going to be first of 2 rookie wide receivers for him. Kelvin Benjamin. Cam is going to play, which will help Mike with Greg Olsen, but should help Rob with Kelvin Benjamin. But still, despite Jimmy Clausen, I still got to give it to Alshon. Benjamin not putting up the numbers he was putting up earlier in the year. So Alshon again for Mike. For wide receiver 1, if I would have told you 7 weeks ago that this would have been, well, maybe not 7 weeks ago because Kelvin was injured. It is shocking to me that this is as close of a matchup as what it is. But we've got Kelvin Megatron Johnson at Chicago going up against Odell Beckham Jr., the surprise of the second half of the season, the shocker of the second half of the season. And Giants are going up against Cleveland. Nope, they're not. They're at St. Louis. I'm going to give it to Kelvin. I don't feel great about it. New York's other wide receivers, other pass catchers, other skill players, period, not that good. Andre Williams had a decent game last week, I guess. But I don't think we're going to see Jennings out there. Ruben Randall has been nowhere. I don't even know offhand who their third wide receiver is. They feed the ball. They force the ball to Odell Beckham Jr. And Detroit, they still do have Golden Tate. And if Rob is going to win this matchup, he needs Tate to vulture stuff from Kelvin, and any touchdowns thrown by Cam need to go to Benjamin instead of Olsen. Can I take Odell Beckham Jr. over Kelvin? Yes, I'm going to. I predict Odell Beckham Jr. to outscore Kelvin Johnson this week. I don't hope for that because I got Kelvin going in the other league, but that's what I hope for. And then finally, quarterbacks. We got Drew Brees at home against Atlanta. Drew Brees coming off a huge performance against Chicago last week. Anyone can throw on Chicago, though, so maybe I should take Kelvin. I don't know. But then we got Peyton at Cincinnati, which on the surface at Cincinnati, that shouldn't be a good matchup for Peyton, except of when it's being played. And I think I mentioned this earlier in this video. Maybe it was only in my first take. But we've got primetime Peyton. Peyton always comes to play in night games. I see him actually having a huge game this week, even though he's been struggling lately. I'm going to take Mike actually pretty big, especially if those couple things don't go Rob's direction. Let's call it Mike 165, Rob 140.